Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this particular episode I want to talk about the Triumph Bobber. What makes it such a great piece of design, why I like it, why it works really well, and why it's possibly the nicest looking bobber that anyone makes. The thing I really like about doing this sort of bike is it's a very Marmite bike. Some people absolutely loathe it, some people absolutely love it. In this I'm going to talk about the design and why I think it's successful. First of all though, something that makes me really sad. I am too big to fit on it. I have tried, I went to the Triumph dealer, I've sat on them, I've sat in a variety of them, and they are too small for me. If you don't know, I'm 6'5" and about 20 stone, so it's not a small bike, but it's not exactly big, so fitting on it is a squeeze. And when I see myself, I just look like a bear on a tricycle, so it doesn't work. So much as though I would love to have one, it's just at that point where I just look too ridiculous and can't get away with it. So in case you don't know the history of bobbers, they originally started in the 1920s and 1930s, where people were trying to chop bits off of motorbikes to try and make them faster. Obviously things have evolved nowadays, and what we understand makes a bike fast is very different from what they understood back then, but back then they were trying to save weight. They really came to the fore after World War II, when people started, well, it was mostly Americans coming back from Europe and realising that European motorbikes at the time were quite small and light by comparison, so they started bobbing up their bikes so that they could make theirs smaller, lighter, faster. So it's just simple things like removing fenders, removing anything extraneous, just chopping it down. Usually they're hardtails as well, and it creates this lovely minimalist sleek style that's always proven popular. It became much like choppers and other kinds of bike, it just became a style in of itself. So to appeal to people that love this style, manufacturers usually have their own bobber that they do. Indian have them, Harley have them, Triumph have them. So it's just a kind of style of bike, and now it's not really about chopping things to make them faster, it's just more of a style statement. But it's a style statement I'm too big to fit on, and I'm not bitter about that at all. For me, as a fan of the bobber style of bikes, I think the Triumph one is the most successful in terms of design. There's a huge amount of work has went in here that's not immediately apparent, but when you actually study the bike, it's just a huge amount of effort has went into the design of this, and it's created something that's really outstanding. And I think a lot of people that don't like the bobber look or don't like the particular style are maybe just missing how clever and how well done it actually is. So for me, some manufacturers just do things like chopping mudguards, removing extraneous things, and just trying to make a sort of lighter bobbed version of it with a smaller seat. But Triumph really went out their way to do something outstanding, a really brilliant tribute to bobber style. You can tell they've looked at the history of bobbers, they've picked out key moments, and they've added a very unique British flavour to it as well, which is just stunning. The Triumph bobber has a lot of what I would call British design in it. So the design of something, doesn't matter what it is, reflects the culture that it's created in. So you'll see this in cars for particular. Italian cars can be flamboyant and excessive and over the top, but still stunning. But a high-end British car will be far more restrained and elegant in its design. That's not to say any one is right or wrong, it's just always interesting how the styles and the cultural influences come through in the design of things. This is even measurable in things like a three-piece suit, or it can be something as simple as a bicycle. It can be even in pens. As an artist that uses a lot of art materials, Japanese pens have a very particular look, German pens have a very particular look and feel. The cultural influence on design is massive and carries through everything. This bike is a quintessential piece of British design. When you look at it, it tells me one thing immediately. It's Henry Cavill in a well-fitting suit. It's Sean Connery. it's restrained, it's well tailored, but it has a muscular handsomeness underneath that coming through. It's not saying it's a supermodel, it's not showing off, it's just keeping things very classic and very distinguished, but also with loads of sex appeal as well. It's very well done. And this is something that just reflects the British cultural personality as well. It's not a group of people that are into flamboyance or excessive displays. It's a country of well-tailored suits and restraint. And the Triumph Bobber is in many ways excessive, but it's done in the most restrained, interesting way that keeps it very British. So first thing you've got to look at is just the lines of the bike. And compared to many other motorcycles, obviously because it's a bobber, it's extremely stripped back, or gives the illusion that it's very stripped back. What's amazing is just how simple the lines are in this. You can break the actual shape down into just 3 shapes. It's a triangle and 2 circles, which is astonishing. Really basic geometric shapes make up this bike. I don't know if this is what puts people off, that it's so apparently simple. It seems like in a world where people go to excesses of covering things in chrome and flares and all sorts of excess in the bike world, this is the exact opposite. They've done everything to hide the excess. As I have mentioned before, the engine on a bike, especially a retro-themed bike, is the heart of the actual bike. You can see the amount of negative space. So if you're not familiar with the art term negative space is the empty space not occupied by something. So when you've got a painting, a sculpture, the space you're not using is often as important as the space you are using. So if you try and fill every corner of something with detail, it's just too much. It's nice to have negative space with nothing in it to let a design breathe and expand and let you digest it rather than just hitting you with it all too much. A lot of good design uses simplicity and negative space to really sell a clean design, and this is something you can see happening here. One of the things I just want to comment on here is look how small the radiator is. They're trying to sell what is essentially a powerful water-cooled bike with everything that comes with it being a water-cooled bike, but they've made the radiator tiny, they've hidden all the cables and hoses. Visually looking at it, if you didn't know, you would think it was just a stripped down oil-cooled bike. I can't even begin to imagine how costly it is to sit and design something like this, to take that all into consideration and make sure it's all hidden. If you remember my Nightstar review, I suggest you watch it, as this is the exact opposite of it. It has cables and wires and bits of plastic going everywhere. That's why I don't think it's particularly finished. The extent to which they've went to on the bobber to hide everything is absolutely stunning. When you're just looking at the picture, there's nothing there that's superfluous. There's no excess. There's no cheaping out and just running cables everywhere. It's an outstandingly clean piece of design. It looks like when you know someone that builds custom bikes, they go to great lengths to hide all the cabling and everything. They've done that on a production bike, and that's not to be ignored. That's an outstanding effort. This has led to a very clean, very simple design that's absolutely outstanding. And that's why I think it appeals to me. I think it's just often the very best design is less is more, but to do that less requires a huge amount of effort. So if on first impressions you look at it, it seems overly simplistic, especially if you're used to more flamboyant motorcycles. But looking at this, when you take the time to digest it, you realise the effort that's went in and making it so clean and so simple looking is just absolutely brilliant. So I'll pick out a few key points on it that are particularly nice. First of all, the customer isn't always right. When it came out in 2017, it had a much smaller fuel tank on it. This was done for aesthetic reasons because it looks better. And loads of people complained it didn't have much range, so they started putting the tank off the Speedmaster on it. I think they were wrong with this. I understand what Triumph were doing. They'd never expected this to be a touring motorcycle. It's not going to be particularly comfortable, so they've went with the aesthetics. And ultimately they capitulated and put the bigger tank on, But I reckon I'd probably be one owner that swapped it back and went for the smaller tank. Because I'm not going to do 200 miles on this. I'd just be, it's to look at. It's basically a pose on. It's a complete poser mobile. It looks fantastic. So you're not really going to be bothered about range, and that's Triumph what they've been doing. They went for the aesthetic above all else, and the customers demanded a bigger tank, so they put one on it. But yeah, I would have went the other way. You've got to take a minute to appreciate the fake carburetors as well. It gives it that lovely classic vintage look. Even although it's fuel injection, water cooled, isn't it lovely how it's got the fins on the actual engine block, and it's got the fake carburetors that makes it look like it's from the 1950s. Just outstanding. But it'll still turn every time you hit the ignition. It's going to have modern reliability but old looks, which is what we really love. Just a small point, I love the way the Triumph engine casing reflects the actual logo. Just another little outstanding piece of design where it's, yeah, we're going to put the T-shape of the Triumph logo into the actual engine itself. It's just selling you on that consistent design across everything. Those same key shapes, simple, clean, used over, sell it as a whole aesthetic. It's just absolutely outstanding. I can't ever know what they used as a design influence, but one of the things it reminded me of is if you look at old vintage British cars, especially things like Jaguars, you can see a lot of the shape language in this motorbike. It very much harkens back to the 1950s. In terms of headlights, fenders, just shapes, that sort of British design classic that Jaguar used to be good at, where you're hiding muscular, powerful forms, but you're doing it in a classic, discreet, subtle way, which is basically Henry Cavill in a suit. You're taking something that has elements, power and danger, but you're restraining it, and that's a very British thing to do. On something like a Ducati or an MV Agusta or a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, that's about excess. They're showing power. They're showing dominance. Where this is much more of a James Bond design. I can kill everyone in the room with my bare hands, but I've got a nice suit on and I can get a bank loan at the same time. That's a much more British attitude to design. Now, if you watch my lengthy rant on the Nightster and why I think it's unfinished, and you look at the negative side of it, you'll see what an absolute mess it is. This is in every way, the exact opposite of that. You can't see any obvious cables unless they're expected ones, like a brake cable. You can't see any computers. You can't see any modern elements at all, even although you know it's a brand new motorbike. To hide all of this takes a long time to bake the design and work on it and rework things and tweak things. This is what gives it such an outstanding look. This is what makes it so clean. And really great design is putting all the effort in to make it look like it was really easy and simple, and then no one will ever fully appreciate just how much work went into this versus just covering something in flares and spoilers for flamboyance. This is an outstanding piece of design, and if you ever see one in the flesh, take a moment to just appreciate it all in, because they've done an outstanding job on this. So, as a great piece of design, I've got some absolute chef's kiss moments on this one. Let's start with the floating seat. So look at the angle of the frame versus the angle of the seat. The seat pretty much looks like it's floating. You know it's held up, but it gives that wonderful sense of dynamism and speed and tension to it because it looks like it's floating. It doesn't look like there's anything holding it up. Then underneath the seat, they've done something just stunning. They've hid the monoshock, so it's got full suspension as you would expect on a normal, comfortable motorbike, but it's all hidden underneath the seat. That's a beautiful piece of work. And the lines of the frame carry through as if it is a hardtail. So you've got all the conveniences of modern suspension, but still with the look of something simplistic from the 1950s. Absolutely brilliant. There's a ridge on the rear mudguard, So first of all, they've put the mudguard really close to the actual wheel. This gives the illusion there is no mudguard, much like a classic bobber design. But on this mudguard there is a ridge running all the way down the middle of it, and this harkens back very much to classic British car design. A lot of classic British cars had this ridge on the bonnet, and it's a gorgeous little nod to vintage design in there. Something else that a lot of manufacturers could take note of is, at the moment, because of emissions regulation, there is some spectacularly ugly exhaust doing the rounds. Manufacturers are desperate to keep sales in a region by matching Euro 5 and Euro 5 Plus and whatever Euro 6 brings, but at the same time they're trying to keep the aesthetics of the bike. I'm sorry to pick on the Nightstar, but it makes an absolute mess of this. Indian are struggling with it. I think on their new Scout bobber, their exhausts are just these enormous bins. On this, what they do is they have the dual pipes coming out, then they go under the bike and feed into the cat, which is hidden under the bike, and then they come out into the slashed off exhaust. So visually, when you look at it, it just looks like it's almost straight piped. It's a gorgeous look to it, like it's a straight piped custom bike, but all the actual emissions things are all hidden under the bike. Again, fantastic design. They haven't compromised anything. They've worked towards the aesthetic they were aiming for at any cost. So when they do things like this, Triumph are taking a big hit on the development cost just to make it as beautiful as possible, and that has to be respected. You can see on the front mudguard as well, they've kept it as tight as possible at the wheel and as small as possible to give the illusion that it's not got any mudguards at all. Obviously, if you live in somewhere like Britain, you do need mudguards or you'll get absolutely drenched, but they've really put a huge effort into hiding them. And at a distance, it just looks like the big chunky bobber wheels, and it doesn't look like it's got an actual mudguard on it. Again, brilliant design. They're going completely for the aesthetic and to make it look as pretty as possible and as true as possible to the bobber aesthetic without compromising on anything else. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that insight into my thoughts on the design. Maybe I'm wrong, this is just from my point of view what I really like about it and what I take notice of that looks brilliant. I think the teams of people that work on these need a little bit of credit, because there'll be little features on a bike that you don't even, 99% of people will never ever notice, but a team of people's worked really hard to put that in to maintain a certain look or a certain aesthetic. And I'm just really sad that I'm too big to ride one. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for watching the video, and I look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you. Bye bye.